everyone, welcome to another episode of our Avrame home. My name is Rob, and if we haven't met before, I want to welcome you to our build. My family and I, we are building our very own Trio 120 from the ground up, and we want to take you along for the journey. As you can see behind me, we have our vapor barrier installed inside the house, and we're going to save the specifics of the vapor barrier for a future video. But today I want to talk to you all about the installation process and how we chose to go about insulating our home. Let's get into today's video. When we were going through the design process of our home, we had a decision to make about how we were going to insulate. We looked at doing spray foam, we looked at doing blown in hemp insulation, blown in wool, like true wool insulation, and we ended up deciding to do rock wool or mineral wool insulation, bat insulation to be more specific. Now, because of the thickness of the walls, what we ended up doing was we bought both 2x6 insulation and 2x4 insulation, and we just stacked those bats up. Okay, well, what we're looking at here is the one gable end that faces what is going to be the front of the house. And what we have here is the first layer of insulation. Because the walls are 9 5/8 thick, and we couldn't get rock wool in that thickness, and we didn't. Well, I guess we could have done blown in, but we didn't. What we're doing is we're doing a 2x4 thick bat and then a 2x6 thick, and that should fit perfectly inside this opening here. So on the whole bottom section of this part of the house, we've done one layer. Now we're going to come back and we're going to put the second layer of 2x6 insulation in here, and that should fill that space. What we're going to try to do is we're going to try to make sure that anywhere where there's a seam, where we've had to cut it, because all of this insulation is either 16 inches on center or 24 inches on center, and the walls aren't either of those dimensions. Every single one is going to have a seam, and so what we're going to try to do is make sure that none of the lines overlap. So when we come over to this section here, we'll put the full piece here, and the cutoff section will go on this side. But it's moving along fairly well. The rock wall, it actually holds really snug between the studs here, and so that makes me feel more confident that when we start doing the incline of the actual roof, that I don't have to worry as much about bats possibly falling out. And so when we do the incline, rather than having the seams be this way, we're actually going to turn the bats sideways, and they'll just be stacked, fitting tightly between all of the trusses. But yeah, it's coming along really well. Since we purchased our kit, Avrame has actually changed the way that they design their buildings, and now all of the trusses are equally spaced throughout the building. For the Trio model, they are 1,250 millimeters apart, which works out to be about 48 on center, 4 foot on center. And for the Duo and the Solo models, they are 600 millimeters apart, which works out to be about 2 foot on center. When you're in the building process, before you purchase your insulation, make sure you verify those measurements so that when you purchase all of your insulation, if you're going to do a bat insulation, make sure that you get the right sizing. Now, what we've heard is that for noise dampening, rock wool is the way to go. You're going to get your best noise dampening by doing that insulation. Spray foam is the fastest way. In 1 to 2 days, you can probably spray foam your entire house. And then if you're going to do it blown in, that's just going to be somewhere in between there. But think that through in the process of your build and choosing what materials you're going to use. Now, because of the thickness of the walls, which are, I believe, 9 5/8 thick, with our two different bats of 2x6 and 2x4 insulation, we got an R value of about R36, I believe. It's a R22 bat for the 2x6, R14 for the 2x4, so R36. After the OSB goes on and the vapor barrier, there's a layer of strapping inside of the home that in the drawings you can also choose to insulate that, which would, I believe, bring your R value up to R43 if you were to choose to insulate that part as well. Katie and I, we haven't decided whether or not we're going to do that yet. I would just increase your R value, but we already feel like R36 is sufficient. But that's something that you can consider too with your drawings. I also think that different insulations probably offer a different R value, so that's something to consider as well, depending on the climate you live in. When we were doing our insulation, we started at the bottom of the house and worked our way up on the gable ends and on the two eaves of the house all the way to the peak. When we got up to the peak, found that some of the insulation started to fall out, and so we had to be creative using some tuck tape to hold it in so it wouldn't fall out all the way. But eventually, all the way to the peak, we got all the insulation installed, and then we put our OSB over top of it to hold it in place, as well as to provide some rigidity to the home. The OSB on the inside is different than what we're used to in North America. Usually you put your sheathing on the outside of the house, but because the outside of our house was strapped for the steel roofing, the OSB went on the inside. Well, I want to encourage you to stay tuned for our next video where we're going to talk about the vapor barrier process and how the Avrame kit differs from a North American build and the way that the different materials are layered together. But that's for a future video. We'll get into that later. For now, thank you for watching. See you again soon.